had, what we know, what a person like us, how this puts us maybe in terms of the receiving end or like privilege. But let's also remember, like, this is just a safe space, and it's not allowed to use foul languages or just make the other person feel unsafe, whether you're the audience or the speaker. So everyone just has to be respectful of each person because we are all learning. Yeah, really. So who would like to go first? Should we do it alphabetically? Okay. I would have gone with Alicia, but let me go with Becky.
I thought as much.
All right.
All right. So can I share screen because I did prepare a presentation?
Yes, you can now.
Okay. Let me put this up here and also share my screen. I'm used to having 2 keyboards at work, so. Share my screen. Sorry, I'm using a Mac, so I have to give Zoom. I have to give Zoom permission to share the screen. Oh, no. So, okay. Okay, so can you see my screen now?
No, we can't. Yes, we can.
You can, okay.
Yeah, but we are seeing Zoom.
Yeah,
like,
I was giving
the,
I had to let Mark give Zoom the
access.
yeah.
Okay.
So you can see the full screen, right?
Yes,
Okay,
we
thank you.
can.
So I'm just going to speak on bridging racial gaps, and I'll speak on it generally briefly with focus on the implications for health. And I am mindful that this is not a medical conference, so I did not put in medical jargon. So, and my name is Becky. I am just passionate about nonprofit work. It's the basis of what I've been doing, and I've been doing it for over 10 years, actually. So yeah, I currently do consulting for nonprofits while working with the government of Canada. So some statistics about racial racism, racial gaps. So in 2016, a census showed that about 21% of people who are racialized, by racialized we mean who experience racism, maybe because of the visible minority or in some other forms, they are low income earners when compared to 12.2% of non-racialized people. And there's racial gap in employment. So if you have, for example, an African name, someone with a non-African name, well, it's 38.3% times more likely to be called for that interview. There's also a racial gap even in housing. Some of us who came in as immigrants would have experienced what we had to go through just to get a house. I mean, I had to pay first and last month's rent and then extra 3 months rent, almost 6 months rent, just because I was coming in and the landlord was like, oh, maybe you can't pay the rent. And I showed my bank statements. I could afford it, but they didn't, want to hear that. They were like, no, you have to pay this and all of that, which we did anyway. And then racialized students are the most likely to be enlisted into special education programs. I could tell you stories and stories and stories from close friends and family whose children had to go through that. In one case, they had to call a meeting and say that the child needed special education. And the mother said, I know my son, he's a good boy. And what ended up happening was they did some investigation and realized that the students in the class were just picking on the boy because he came in newly as an immigrant and they didn't want him in their circle. So if he did something, they reported him to the teacher. If he did something, they talked to the principal. So it was just one thing after the other. And that's how that boy, because the mother stood her ground, she didn't get to put the child in a special education program because she was able to stand her ground. But the stories are endless. And then for the health part, a study in Quebec showed that even people who come in as immigrants report worse health indicators than their Canadian counterparts. The study actually said that they come in with lovely mental health. They're positive because they're usually coming in from countries where they didn't have lots of opportunities. But 10 years down the line, their health begin to decline. And the main determinant reported for the group was dissatisfaction with life. So they're coming into a land where they had opportunities, but they're still dissatisfied with life. And like I said, many factors determine how healthy someone is. They're called social determinants of health, which some of us already know, and the racial issues. Racial issues has been listed as one of them. So simply put, if you continually face racism all the time, you stand a higher chance of developing several mental health issues, some of which include temper, anxiety, headaches, withdrawal, panic, feelings of loneliness, negativity, feelings of negativity, insomnia, unable to sleep, despair, depression, stress, and nervousness and all of that. So this list is not exhaustive. These are just some of the things you can face if you're constantly faced with, if you're constantly being racialized. And if you're in this room today, whether you have experienced it in some form or the other, and you have not gone through or experienced any of the feelings that has been mentioned in this slide, then you've not felt loneliness or nervous, you've not been feeling frustrated, worried. Sometimes you don't even know, but you just start having these feelings. You may not have realized it's because of the constant pressure that you face being racialized. If you have never experienced these feelings in some form or the other, then I just have one word to describe you. So what's the big question? Marry me? No. How do we bridge racial gaps so everyone can live a healthier lives? And it's actually that simple. It's about, we talked about policy all the time, and review implementation, but the mind with which the government needs to do it is they need to implement policies with the affected groups, not just in mind, but involving them. So what usually happens is sometimes the tendency is to take, somebody in the community, who's the most important person in this community? It's maybe Tomi because she runs a foundation. I'm going to use her as the example for the rest of the community. No, what they should do is it should be intentional and deliberate, and it should be adequate representation, subsections of communities, Asians, Africans, Jamaicans, different indigenous people. Let there be adequate representation of people from this community, not just in the implementation, but in the decision making, in the policy making, and more studies on these issues. So during the course of this study, I found that we have very limited studies on racial issues as it affects racialized groups in Canada. There are thousands and thousands of studies in the United States and our neighbors in the southern border. But in Canada, there is very limited studies. So there needs to be more studies into these issues, and addressing the health inequalities that exist is part of it, with involvement of all stakeholders. So as I said before, involve people in these communities in addressing these health inequalities. They are the best people to tell you how exactly you can help them and the issues that they face. And what can you as an individual do, whether you're racialized or not? You need to just be aware of the issues and talk about them. Don't shy away from them. Sometimes I have these conversations with my colleagues in the office, from all kinds, both racialized and not. And when we had opportunities, I talked about some of the issues I had faced, how people get up, don't want to sit by me on the train. I've even had someone refuse to sell something in the store to my husband. She was like, "Oh no, this is not for sale." And he walked away. As he was walking away, somebody else came and she was like, "Oh, this product is nice. This is the price." He just shook his head and he was like, the irony of the issue, it was another race, someone from another racial group that was doing this. I'm like, oh, so the gap is not just between, your Black or immigrant or Asian or Chinese or Indian or indigenous. It's also amongst ourselves. So that's an area we need to look at, have these conversations like we're having it now, which is good. And then if you are racialized or you're not, I should add, take care of your mental health. You need to realize that you are at a risk. We usually say a problem realized is half solved. I realized that I could be at a risk of developing the issues that I mentioned, the mental health issues. And so when I begin to have feelings of frustration, feelings of anxiety, then I sit back and realize, okay, what happened this week? What did I go through? I need to also realize that part of what I go through could be as a result of what I experience in terms of racism and all of that. And that is just a snapshot because I realized that there are other people to speak, and that is all. Thank you.
Thanks for being right on time.
Sharing.
So I think I would move to, or do you want to ask? Okay, we can take questions after. If you have questions, just note them down. I think I'll move next to Alicia now.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, thank you to Tuomi and to TCLI for having me here today. My name is Alicia Fowler, and I am honored to be a part of today's discussion. I'm originally from Prince Albert, which is on Treaty 6 territory, and I now make my home in Edmonton, which is also on Treaty 6 territory. And I live here with my husband, and we're raising our 2 little girls here. So I just want to do a brief little treaty acknowledgement that I acknowledge I am a guest here on Treaty 6 lands. It's traditional home to many Indigenous people and nations, and I'm grateful to be here. So to be transparent about my role today, I have never, by no means an expert, but I do know in my professional life as a CPA CA, sorry, is my okay, my connection says it's unstable. Am I still there? Yeah, okay. Okay, so in my professional life as a CPA CA and my personal life as a mom, an auntie, a friend, a sister, I've definitely been witness to racial gaps and the privilege that I inherently have as a white woman, as a white person. So today I'm here to learn more than anything about racial gaps and what I can do to use my privilege in a way to support closing the racial gaps with and for the people around me. I'm going to make mistakes as well as into the future, and I want to learn how to make those mistakes gracefully. And I do appreciate the opportunity to share with everyone today. So on the topic of racial gap and what it means to me. So I guess essentially racial gap means an inequity in opportunities as a result of race and culture. Speaking from the perspective of privilege, I do know that I have always had access to basic needs and opportunities that have been free from bias. Things like education, healthcare, socioeconomic advantages. I'm learning that because of my racial privilege, I started out further ahead in the eyes of society than my BIPOC brothers and sisters. My society was secured by having white parents, white skin, and my family was always given opportunity to education, healthcare, and socioeconomic advantages because of the color of our skin. I know that in the work that I do as an accountant and business professional, there's very low representation by Black and Indigenous people specifically in our profession. I see that at the decision-making tables, it's people that look like me that develop policy that inherently benefit people that look like me. I know that I'm starting from a place in life that has always benefited people. Money has never been negatively impacted by things like segregation, which isn't that long ago, residential schools, again, not that long ago. I was told and believed for so long from the time I was a little girl that if you work hard, you will succeed, and that is the determinant of where you end up in life. In part, this is true. I do believe in hard work, but it is largely a myth that we as privileged people are taught. And I think we like to believe this myth because it substantiates where we end up in life. What can I do? This is really a question, go back to the panel and to the audience. I do know that, I mean, from what I'm reading, that I can speak out. I do know from speaking to people that look like me, other white people, that there can be an inherent fear of making mistakes, being called out for saying the wrong thing. And then there's also guilt for not saying the right thing at the right time. So, but what I'm trying to do is be open to make mistakes. I speak out, say wrong things, am corrected, and hope that I learn from those mistakes and move forward, and just learn how to do that gracefully. I can ask questions. A good one that I heard from a friend yesterday is to ask who is not in the room and why aren't they there? And ask how I can to amplify and support. But again, those are just, coming from my place of privilege, what I think I can do, not a complete picture of what I can do. And that's really it. It's here to learn.
Thank you. Okay. So everyone is clapping. Thanks. Okay, so I would move next to Clinton.
Sure. Hey, hope everyone's doing well and keeping warm. My name is Clinton Johannes, and I'd like to thank Priscilla and TCLI for asking me to speak. It's such an honor to be able to, share some of my thoughts and stuff. So that's great. So I guess I'll just dig right into it. So I work in finance. I'm an advisor, financial broker advisor, partner with a whole bunch of different companies, Canada's top financial firms and banks across the country. And the organization I'm partnered with, I really, really like the organization because we are very diverse within races and cultures and people of color. And that's awesome. It's a great environment to be in, and it's awesome to promote and, encourage and celebrate other people's races, religions, and colors. So that's great. Not only are we very diverse in those different cultures and races within our company, but our company is also highly valued with the gender gap as well. So within our foundation, our company, I believe we are one of the top in Canada with 50% female agents and 50% male agents. It's not exactly, but somewhere near there. But it's really awesome knowing I'm part of an organization where all of that stuff, is very valuable, and I believe it's the kind of area where people need to move into, because we are very diverse and multicultural country. So like I said, I'm an advisor. I help people with finances. So I find even within Canada, people born in Canada, there's a lot of gaps in learning about finances and how money works and all that stuff. But another big area too is, people moving into Canada, immigrants, new races and people of color and different religions, all that coming to Canada, they might not know anything. So it's great to be able to educate those people on how money and finances work, because like I say, even Canadians aren't properly educated. But like I say, the most important thing is the people new to Canada, they might not know anything to do with money and finances. So it's great to be able to educate them so that they're, they feel welcome within our country, and they get to, they aren't, at a disadvantage. We get to educate them and help them out there. So I think that's very important, obviously, because this is a country where equal opportunity, and I mean, that should that should involve, you know, learning and education and everything like that. So it's great. I like one of my things about you know, being in Canada is in a multicultural, diverse country is it's great learning about other different races and cultures. Like I'm a big fan of food, and one thing I really value is, you know, learning different types of food or how different cultures and races cook food. And I've always been a big fan of food and trying out new things and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I think it's very important, you know, if there is some type of, you know, racial gaps, I think it's very important. I mean, within a workplace or something like that, because we do see it everywhere. But I think it's very important to stand up for other people. You know, if you see somebody, you know, talking down or bad to another type of race or something, you know, they need help. So it doesn't matter who you are, stick up for good people. We want to make everyone feel welcome. We're not here to fight. We're here to work together and be part of something great. So it's awesome, you know, being in a country where multiculturalism is more accepted than most places in the world. And yeah, I think that's great. So that's pretty much what I had to speak about. So yeah, I hope everyone liked that, and yeah, I'm excited to hear from some more people. Thanks.
All right, thank you. So I'll move to Ruby. Ruby.
Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me? Okay, awesome.
Yes.
Thank you everyone for sharing your stories. Actually, I always wonder about, is it best to go first or best to go last? But sometimes you just sort of hear everyone's stories and you become so humbled by them as well. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ruby Thandy. I'm a social worker with City of Edmonton, and I'm in community wellness. So a little bit about me, how I wanted to sort of approach this panel. It's been a while since I've done a panel, but I wanted to sort of share my personal experiences as well as my work experiences and how to sort of relate to that understanding of what racial gap in my experience or in education has been. And I think I bring a different unique story as well, because I'm a first generation immigrant. My parents were immigrated to Canada in the early 70s. So I think from their experience, I've learned a lot about what it is about, you know, coming here as a newcomer and as an immigrant child or a child of an immigrant family, you know, what it is I've experienced through their lens has really given me a different perspective on how I approach my work and how I've done any kind of personal experience as well as my professional experience. I've been, you know, I graduated with social work from Ryerson University in Toronto, and since then I did a variety of different areas of work. And I think my work has really shown me some of those gaps as well in how we implement services and frontline programs to people who are in those vulnerable situations, and BIPOC as well. And when I first began in children's services, that was one piece of work I did in Ontario that really humbled my experiences as well. Being on the front lines as a frontline children's services worker, you learn a lot, not only as an individual, but as a parent, as a woman, and as a woman of color. And sometimes there's experiences that I had in my work experience where I am Indian. My parents are from India, but then I'm not Indian enough within my own culture, but I'm too Indian, that tokenistic person for my organization. And we kind of alluded to that, you know, can you be that one person that can talk about your culture? It's like, no, because I'm born in Winnipeg, you know? So again, my lens really comes from my personal experience and my work experience. So I'm gonna share a little bit about what I've had, and has given me a lot of reflection over my period of time. And it's actually made me a better person and a better social worker with the people I work with. So children's services, I did it for a number of years. I've also when I moved to Edmonton, I felt like I was a brand new person all over again. You know, even though I'm born and raised in Canada, my parents' experiences here have really led me to understand what the struggles of a lot of newcomers, people of color, have had coming into a new country, sacrificing their normal way of living. And Becky, you really nailed it when it comes to that letting go of your norm. They were once very happy people, now coming to a new society and struggling, trying to belong and trying to move forward. I mean, my father had an education. He had a degree in engineering, and he came here and he couldn't get a job. And at that point, you know, as a new person, you know, understanding his experiencing, how does this happen? I'm educated. How does this happen? Having to go back to school, or needing to go back to school to meet those standards of the Canadian standard or the Western culture was also a struggle he faced. And, you know, him, and like many, chose not to do that because they had to survive. They had to raise a family. So instead of fighting for an engineer job where he probably could have done so much better, he would do shift work, working at a convenience store at night and taxi cab by day, supporting his family. And mom would work wherever she felt like it. Again, my father spoke English. He had good knowledge. He wore a turban, but unfortunately he couldn't get work. And if you're a Sikh baptized man, you wear a turban and it's a part of your religion, it's a part of your faith. Unfortunately, my father had to make the decision of his faith or survival, and he cut his hair in order to get work. And that wasn't even work in his area. So again, understanding that sacrifice that people have to make to come into a new country to be able to survive, and not having those opportunities like their counterparts can really make a difference on how they move forward and what opportunities that they might have. So, again, this is in the 70s. I feel like there's remnants of it still happening right now in 2021. And, being a student here and growing up here and now being a professional, I felt like I've had some of those similar experiences coming from my father. And, he would ask me questions like, are you sure you didn't get that job because of your color? And I would like, oh, Dad, don't worry about it. It's nothing like that. But I really didn't understand his sacrifice at that time until way later in life. And I'm like, he had a point to his story because he went through that struggle himself. So it really got me reflecting about, is my color or my background a way to mitigate me from other opportunities? And if you look at my name, it's Ruby Thandy. I've chosen to use my nickname as a way to communicate on paper, and my real name is Jagrup. So when people would see that name as opposed to this name, even my Indian counterparts are like, oh, I thought I was going to be interviewing a white person, right? Again, Becky touched on that. Our names can really mitigate our opportunities as well, and we don't even realize it until we actually reflect. And for me, my personal reflection has really helped me to understand, as a child of an immigrant family, what the opportunities that they didn't get. And now I'm trying to give opportunities to my family. I do have privilege. I have an education, and it's not because I just got it. My father sacrificed a lot to give me that education. So I need to understand, as an individual, I'm also here to learn. In this panel, I'm also here to learn that how individually we get to where we are. And I think for me, that's been a big experience. And I'm moving forward now at the City of Edmonton. I've done work in family violence. I've done work in mental health. If people are familiar with our services from before, we used to do groups for women and men on personal development and family violence. And even that work so humbled me to understand how men and women go through so many other struggles on top of dealing with racial bias within their community. And so for me, again, my personal experiences, my work experiences have really humbled me to understand that it's not just a struggle because as an immigrant child, if you look at me, again, my color is different. I don't have an accent. My father did, so he didn't get the same opportunities I did. Again, on the phone, I sound like a Canadian person, and I've had people approach me and say, oh, I thought you were, you would have spoken a different language. Where are you really from? And I'm like, Toronto. Where are you really from? Winnipeg. Again, I understand what they're getting at, but when you have some of these questions come to you naturally, because it's just a place of inquiry as an individual or person of color, you're like, what are they really asking? So I'm here at this panel just to sort of understand people's experiences and how that has made inquiring minds or questions about your, where have you been? How have you gotten there? I think it's wonderful to know how people have a story, and everyone has a story that I think that's another way of building themselves. And I think having forums like this is a wonderful way of understanding our individual stories, and also how we can move from that and how we can work together to move from there. So I'm really looking forward to hearing so much more, and I have so much more to share, but I wanted to sort of go there because I could talk forever too. So thank you.
Thanks, Ruby. So does anyone have any question, like maybe members of the panel for another panel member? Becky, any questions? Ask Alicia, Clinton, Ruby? Ruby, any question? Alicia, any question? Okay, so we leave it to the audience now. So does anyone in the audience have any question?
I think I do.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you very much to the speakers and TCLI Foundation for organizing this. My question will be to Ruby, first of all. I mean, concerning your name, you said something about having to like change your name. So like, I mean, is that still necessary like for newcomers into the system?
Well, I think my name sort of, okay, there's an evolution of how my name sort of came to Ruby, because actually, it's actually more of a nickname that stuck to me since I was a child. And I think for
Okay.
my father, it was just an easier way to, is J group female or male? When you see Ruby, it was just easier. I think it was for him, it was an easy way to communicate. That being said, I do believe that it's important to share your personal name, especially now. It's your identity. Why move away from your identity when this is something that's so true to you? My dad lost his identity
Okay.
when he came to Canada because he had ended up cutting his hair to get to where he's at. But I feel like that was his way of sort of connecting or assimilating with that Western culture that he just had to move forward. I feel like now I encourage people to use your name, even though you might feel like, oh, I'm not sure what they're going to say, that kind of thing. I think more and more, although I say it's changing, change is slow, but I feel like a lot more organizations are far more appreciative of people using, their true identity. Again, I'm one of those people. That's a personal note for me. I've kept Ruby for so long because now I'm just so used to it. Going back to the other is just one of those things, but I always encourage folks, if you can, and do so always. That just shows power in your name. Anyone else?
Thank
I guess
you.
other folks, Clint, Alicia, Becky.
Does anyone else have any questions? So Annie made a comment. I don't know if somebody wants to like address it or comment about it. She said, "Thank you. As a white woman, I never realized how loaded a question it was to ask my students where they are from. But heard from my students and family the risks seem associated with this question for many."
Well, if I would just comment on that. So I, having worked with where I'm from, I used to work with all kinds of people, women experiencing sexual violence, children experiencing homelessness, drug abuse, sexual abuse, all kinds. So we must also realize that every immigrant coming into Canada has a story, and this story would also form the basis of their response. So, for example, people ask me all the time, what country are you from and where are you from? Um, I don't, maybe because I have worked and I've had trainings in psychology, in public health, for me, it just sounds like a normal question. But to, for people, that question could mean, oh, they could just immediately begin to think of the experiences and the negative experiences they've had in the past. So I would not really say that question is a racist question or and all of that, but I would say that it depends on the experiences the person has had. Yeah, I stand to be corrected. Most people coming in may not have had positive experiences, but if you meet people with positive experiences, they're generally gracious with that question. But if you meet people who have had negative experiences, then that question stands out as a racist. But I would also like to say that even as we begin to talk about these issues and address these issues, like I told Tony, we also need to extend, be gracious to white people, be gracious to non-racialized people, especially when we realize that they're just trying and they're trying to understand the issues. So they're going to make those mistakes, just as we are going to also make mistakes in terms of their culture and traditions here. So we should be gracious. We should address the issues and not attack the person. So it is about the issues. We should focus on the issue and not take it out on the person, make them feel bad, make them guilt them into admitting that being white is wrong. No, we should address the issues, focus on the issues and not attacking the person. Extend our hands of graciousness, seek to educate them about where we are from, not to attack them and make them feel lesser than they are. So even as we focus on addressing the issues, we should remember not to attack the person.
Okay. Thank you so much. Any other question?
May I add to that? Thank you,
Okay.
Becky, for sharing your thoughts. And I just wanted to sort of add a little bit to that question or that thought that Anne brought forward. I agree. I don't think it's a racist question per se, because I mean, as an individual, I've had, again, people have asked me in interesting ways of, where you're from and that kind of thing. And I think it's the context as well, right? Like, if a teacher would say, hey, we're getting to know where people are coming from. It's interesting to learn different cultures. Do you have a different culture to share? That would be awesome. I think it's how we present it as well. Again, presented to me, again, I always ask, the reason why that caught me that one time when people were asking where I was from, like, so what's your purpose of asking me? Is it within the context that we're in? Is it for work or is it for whatever? I think it put the person at ease. Again, as Becky mentioned, we all have a story. And when I did my work with newcomers, and part of my questions were to know where they came from, a lot of newcomers were from refugee camps and the trauma they might have experienced there. And when you say where you're from, it might bring back all that trauma as well, right? So it's not about opening the Pandora's box about trauma or anything like that. I think it's really neat that if we just sort of open it as a celebratory inquiry, right? Like, again, when people have asked me where I'm from, I guess it depends on the context. In my workplace, we've celebrated culture. And when I get involved and people ask, so, what do you do? What's some of your special foods? Just some random questions like that. I get excited about sharing that, even though it's, I'm a Canadian born woman, but I'm still really connected to my roots. And I love to share that. And again, I think Clinton mentioned that we live in a multicultural society in Canada. We're always curious about asking questions. As Canadians, we're super polite too. And we always say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, that kind of thing as well. But again, I think it's cool that when we get to know each other, it opens up that communication that, wow, this person's interested in me. And on the other end, it's like, wow, this person's so cool. They're from so-and-so culture, or they've taught me this. So I think it really is how we ask it and how we approach the situation. If it's coming from a corner of or a moment of threat, then you'd be hesitant to answer, or inquiry, or just one of those, so where are you from? Like, again, I really believe that if someone's inquiring about culture or race, I think it's cool, but it's how we ask that question and just remember that we all have a story. So it might come with a lot of baggage, or it might come with some context. So it's always nice to see how people respond and how they would ask that question.
Okay, thank you, Ruby. So I don't know if anyone still has any question or comments to make. Like, you don't really have to have any question. Maybe if you have comments also. So Alicia says she has something to say.
Yeah, well, I just have a question actually. I put it in the chat, but I think like Ruby and Becky are being so gracious by extending understanding to people who are making mistakes. And I think that's great. That said, I'm wondering, at what point do you draw the line between a mistake, racism, and yeah, how do you identify that? How do you address that? And how can, I, as an ally and someone who takes interest in this and wants to support, how can I do the same?
What part did you miss, Becky? She said, like, at what point do you draw the line between what is offensive and what's not offensive, especially for an ally? Like, if you're coming from an angle of learning, really. So, like, how do you not miscommunicate? I guess that's what she's asking. Like, how do you not say the wrong things, or at what point would they be perceived as being demeaning, or at what point is it received as an honest question or an honest statement?
Okay, yeah.
That's what I understood, but Alicia can correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay, so that's a very good question, and it's actually a very important question to ask. So at the end of the day, we should all remember that we are all human beings, and we are all human beings, and we have the capacity to express goodness and graciousness and have the capacity to express contempt. And so the basic line is, what I'm trying to say is we have the capacity to be kind. And when you really seek to be kind, when you seek to be gracious, when you seek to understand with good intentions, you would almost say the right thing every time. So even when you're saying the wrong thing, the person you're talking to would understand your intention. So it's not really being careful what to say or what not to say, it's what is your intention. And also, um, racial issues are issues that we are going to have to deal with. So I would also want to encourage people who are non-racialized to take a little bit of time. We have Google, we have all the social media platforms. Take some time to kind of understand what is acceptable and what is not. For example, I work in an environment where I have to talk to people all the time, including the public sometimes. And sometimes when they get too angry, even just the last week, I had someone use the N word on me. Yes. And my organization absolutely does not tolerate that. And the policy is the moment someone gets abusive, stop the meeting. So immediately I stop the meeting and I put a note there. So the person is going to be marked. When the person calls back, the person will have a hard time getting through. He will get through, but he will not be given an easy time at all, because there's zero tolerance for that. But I didn't feel bad because we have policies. So he didn't know me, but he just heard my accent, and of course he dropped that. We all know the N word is not the word you should use. So we know there are certain words we shouldn't use. Just take some time and just kind of find out, okay, when I'm talking to an Asian, I'm talking to a Black person, what are some terms I should not use? Don't go do some study and start quoting. No, just read through them and just know them. But the most important thing is, if you have good intentions, if you intend to be kind, if you intend to use kind words, you can never go wrong with a kind word. Like Ruby says, ask it in good context. Oh, hi, I just love your hair. People have asked me, oh, I love your hair. This is so lovely. Where are you from? I'm like, oh, I'm from Nigeria. Oh, yeah. And we make this kind of hair all the time. How many hours do you spend? But if the person just comes and look at you, I'm like, so where are you from again? You know, it's just, you understand? So you can never go wrong when your intention is to be kind, is to be gracious. And if you take a little time to kind of learn what is acceptable and what is not, but by all means, I really absolutely do not like it when I hear white people walking on eggshells, wondering if I'm saying the right thing, I'm not saying the right thing. I mean, I imagine that a white person comes to my country and I'm having to feel guilty. I'm in my original country. I'm having to feel guilty. I'm having to mind what I say. I'm going to be living on edge, and that would also lead to other mental issues. So I would say take a little time, just learn what is acceptable and not what is not from what you see on online. And also let your intention be to be kind, to be gracious. You can never go wrong with being kind. And when the person realizes your intention, they would correct you in a very nice way, except the person is really mean. And as Ruby says, if they've had really bad experiences and all of that.
May I share? I had something to add to that. Becky, you're so awesome because you kind of always say the right words right after. And I'm like, oh my God, yes, that's so true. You know what, Alicia, I think it's, again, being kind. I don't know if there's people in this virtual room today that are fans of Brene Brown. I love her. She's a wonderful person. She talks about that thing about connection and that empathy and building that empathy. And I think there's a part of that. We're human. We're humans, but human beings are very complex individuals, right? We're very complex. We come with emotion. We come with stories. We might have trauma. Might have so much going on in our life that, again, when you're asking an individual about where they're from or that kind of thing, it might bring back a whole bunch of other memories because of their personal experiences. And I'll use an example of me putting my foot in my mouth years ago when I was a student and understanding as a BIPOC person, what the other person might feel like. And again, did it completely out of context. And I learned from it. I was a student, and one of my friends who was white, Caucasian from Canada, French Canadian. And I remember, my brother using this derogatory word referring to white women. And again, as a child, it came out. He was my older brother. I didn't know any different. And it's just one of those things. As I got older, I heard it more, not even realizing the context of what that word meant, because I was young too. I was learning, I was a child. And I remember saying that word to my friend in a funny way. And she's like, hey, that's not fair. And right away, I stopped. That split moment that I actually said this word, not even knowing the context of what I was saying, it hit me. It hit my gut really, really awfully. And I'm like, wow, if I made her feel bad, why would I say something like that? Right. So again, I had to be in a position to be, someone had to point a finger at me one day to say to me, again, this is 25 years later that I'm sharing this story as well, that, our life experience really teaches us where we're coming from. And we all have a story. And she had a story too, which I didn't know when I got to know her. But again, she was my friend. She's like, you're not supposed to say that, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. I needed to be told. And I think it's okay. I think, again, with my friends and my family, I'm able to tell them. But when you're in a stranger or a professional situation, it's not that easy. And so I think coming from a place of kindness, Becky, like you said, you nailed it. Just coming from a place of good intention. I mean, I'll tell you, people can read the BS through if they know it's not good intention, right? I'm sure everyone's had that experience. So again, coming from a place of good intention, I always say assume good intent unless otherwise, because if it hits my gut the wrong way like that did, I know not to do that again. And I know I may have to correct that person so they don't do it again. So it's my place also to educate that individual and vice versa. We learn from each other. And I think that's what panel discussions like this are. We are learning from each other and how to respond. I think we're getting better at it. Change is slow, but I think we're all getting better just by even having conversations like this.
Thanks, Ruby. Who's iPhone? What's your name, please? We can't hear you.
My name is IT. Sorry.
IT. Okay, hi.
I've been having a hard time trying to get my iPhone to change my name. That's not happening. So I'm really sorry. Okay.
Okay.
My name is IT. I'm an immigrant. I'm Nigerian. I'm just privileged to have white skin, or fair or light skin, but I'm Nigerian. And I just wanted to talk about something someone had mentioned about how do you, maybe just communicate with someone who might not be, of the same race. I think one thing I want to say is it's best to disabuse our minds generally of the information we see on the media, because they're not always correct representations of other people. For example, I worked in a place and I preferred to use my Nigerian name, that's Itoro. And she asked what country I was from, and I said Nigeria. And she asked if we hop on trees. I'm like, wow, that's an amazing question. And I said to her, I said, well, I'm just going to say something, and please don't take it the wrong way. But this was what I had to say to her. I said, in Nigeria, I could go straight to my ATM, pay in my check, and I will cash the money while I'm still standing at the ATM. I don't need to wait for 7 days. And I really didn't mean to, come back at her, but I just wanted her to realize that what you've been hearing in the media is not correct. And out of that conversation, she asked me, she was like, okay, so what do you drive? Do you guys drive on horses? I said, no. When I came to Canada, I had to sell my 2 cars. I had 2 houses in Nigeria, and I came here and I have to start all over. So what I'm trying to say is, as someone who is
Can you tell me what it says on the clock for the?
Sorry.
As someone who is who's trying to communicate with the next person, it's good to be honest, but first I'll say let's disabuse our minds of just taking everything we see on media, because sometimes they're not really correct representations of where the other person is coming from. So just having that, especially like the other speaker said, her dad was an engineer. So just having the fact that there are 2 ways, basically 2 ways people get here in Canada. Either you're coming as a skilled immigrant, which means you've had one of the highest level of educations in your country, or you're coming in as maybe someone whose country is at war. So sometimes war is not your fault, but then that doesn't mean that the person hasn't had education in their country. So I'm just trying to say that, if we can acknowledge that most people who are coming are professionals, most immigrants who are here are professionals, and they're just having to start their life afresh, either because they choose or they chose to, move to a different country, or because maybe the situation in their home was not very pleasant. I find that when people approach me from that easier. But when people approach me from the context of what they hear on the news, or maybe they've watched Tarzan and they approach me from the Tarzan perspective, I feel like that's when I feel disrespected. But when people see me as I speak English might not be my first language, but for me to be able to make a correct sentence in English means I have been to at least 12 years of school or more, and like the other speaker said, her dad had to go or forfeit all of those things just to come back and settle in. So every immigrant, we see, if we can treat them with the fact that this person might just be at the peak of his career and having to start over. If we have just that at the back of our minds and, just treat them as a professional, you would be shocked how open, they would be. But let's not just, approach people from what we see on the media. I think that's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So before Quincy said he has something to comment on, but just before I get into that, Maggie made a statement in the comment box. I don't know if any of the panel has read it. If you have a contribution, a response to that, or if anyone in the audience also has something to say about that. So actually, she said, since you mentioned Becky, maybe Becky should
Yeah,
respond.
thank you. So for organizations, I must say that I am actually impressed with the Canadian response, because I've worked in 3 different organizations since I came to Canada, and they have always had that conversation, especially what started happening with the US with the BLM movement. People are beginning to have these conversations, and they're beginning to engage people of color, people who are racialized in the decision making. So one thing organizations need to do is make a deliberate effort to be intentional about your processes. For example, have a quota. I know that there is a quota for Indigenous Canadians in some organizations. So for every 5 Canadians would employ 2 Indigenous Canadian. Tell yourself that 25% of our workforce would be diverse. And as IT, who just spoke, iPhone has said, many immigrants, if you see an immigrant coming as a skilled worker, you just assume that person is highly educated. For example, someone in my church once told me, why do Nigerians, every Nigerian have met have at least 1 master's degree? And yes, I mean, when I was applying for jobs in Canada, all the jobs I got, except for one of them, I took out all my qualifications and degrees because I kept hearing, you are too qualified, you are too qualified, you're too qualified. So I removed all the qualifications and just left my basic education. So we are actually, most of these people are actually very, very skilled people. So what I'm trying to say is, if you have an organization, there are people who are skilled that your organization could leverage on. So have a quota. And then if you have people who are racialized in your organization, involve them in the planning, in the conceptualization, involve them in the implementation. So there is no better person to involve in implementing something about racism than people who are experiencing racism. Fine, it's going to be diverse, but let them be involved in the decision making. And then you have to be intentional. Part of your strategy, part of what I do is also to have strategy sessions with nonprofits and social enterprises that are struggling. So part of your strategy should be what in the next 2 to 3 years, we want 20% or 10% of our workforce to be diverse. We also want to have activities. Like in my son's school, we have an African day. We have where we come, we showcase our food, our dressing, and our music, and all of that. That was pre-COVID. So you could begin to have activities. Ask for people to submit proposals on how best these issues can be addressed in organization. Include it in your strategy, include it in your plan for the year, include it in your budget. The organization has to be deliberate about it. And also it would also be good to have people come in to talk about these issues, and also have assistance programs. For example, if you have employees, identify programs that you believe would be beneficial to them as part of capacity building, training. If you have people who are racialized, have them, like, if you know, maybe if you have access to psychologists or people who help and all of that, incorporate it as a culture into your organization where you're paying attention to the mental health of your employees. You're also paying attention to the racial issues. Be deliberate, be intentional, include it in your strategy, include it in your budget, involve people experiencing these issues in the planning and implementation, do research. So it's not just one thing, and my list is not exhaustive. It's just several things coming together to make it work. And like I said, you can never go wrong with a good intention if you do it properly.
Thank you. I think we'll just take one more comment and that'll be all, just so we are within time. So we'll take all of the comments noted, and I'll just let Clinton round up with the comments he said he had to make. So yeah, Clinton, you can go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, like I said, I just wanted to add what everyone was just, kind of the same topic everyone was just discussing. I just wanted to bring up some points. It is true sometimes when other people are asking other people of color and races about some of their, background or whatever. I mean, it all comes down to education. I mean, you definitely need to have an open mind. As an example, we'll kind of look at the Edmonton CFL team, the Edmonton Eskimos. They're changing their name. I grew up in Alberta, Canada, my whole life. I know a lot of northern Indigenous people. I never would have thought the word Eskimo was derogatory against them. I've always used the word Eskimo, but I had no idea of the background of the history of that. So, like I say, sometimes people say, inappropriate things or dumb things, but you just keep an open mind, because it's they're probably just lack knowledge or know what they're talking about, right? And then another thing I wanted to point out too is it's sad when you have new immigrants or cultures or colors coming to Canada, and somebody, say, of white color, says something derogatory against them. They have no right to do that, because everyone in North America, it doesn't matter what your color is, of course, for the exception of Native Americans, everyone is an immigrant to this country. So really, nobody has a right to badmouth other colors or cultures or anything like that, because we are a multicultural or diverse country. So yeah, just keep that in mind.
Okay. Okay. People are saying they didn't know Eskimo was derogatory, so that's just thing about us learning, unlearning, and just being open to each other, more accommodating of each other, and also coming from a place of being kind to others, because like you never miss out on kindness. And as I always say, approach really matters, and approach and attitude like is really everything. It determines how the other person is gonna receive things, and it's just also good for us to be willing to learn, unlearn. We all have like certain parts and angles we also have to learn and unlearn from, even maybe not within our own culture, in other cultures also. So thanks everyone for joining. Yeah, and those who register for refreshment, you get your refreshment also. Thanks to the speakers. It was a really insightful session, and I really do appreciate you coming up. Yeah, see you in the afternoon session if you can also make it. Okay, thanks for clapping also. Have a good morning or afternoon. Yeah. Bye.